Excuse me, where did you wander in from? I demand that you go back to your proper seat immediately. A place like this isn't meant for people like you. Get out of here right now!
What is she doing in first class? Claire Whitman did not whisper it. She said it loud enough for the first 3 rows to hear. The words cut through the cabin before the engines had even started. Champagne glasses paused halfway to mouths. A newspaper lowered. A woman in pearls turned her head just enough to stare, without admitting she was staring. In seat 3A, Evelyn Brooks looked up from her paperback. She was 73 years old, gray hair, reading glasses, a navy dress pressed clean at the knees. A small gold airplane pin rested on her collar, catching the soft cabin light whenever she breathed. She did not look startled. That bothered Claire more than anything. "Excuse me?" Evelyn asked. Claire stood in the aisle with a clipboard tucked against her ribs. Her blonde hair was pulled tight. Her uniform looked perfect. Too perfect, like armor. "Your boarding pass," Claire said. "Now." The word now landed harder than it needed to. Evelyn blinked once, slowly. Then she reached into the book and pulled out the boarding pass she had been using as a bookmark. Claire took it with 2 fingers, not like paper, like evidence. She studied it, turned it over, held it closer to her face. Her mouth tightened in a way that told the whole cabin she had already decided what she wanted to believe. "Where did you get this?" Claire asked. Evelyn's voice stayed low. "I bought it with what?" The cabin went still. Not quiet. Still. There is a difference. Quiet is peaceful. Still is fear trying not to move. Evelyn looked at her for a long second. Claire's eyes flicked to Evelyn's dress, then to her shoes, then to the old leather purse resting near her feet. A purse that had been repaired twice, because Evelyn believed useful things deserved care. Claire turned slightly toward the other passengers. "I'm sorry, folks," she said with a tight little smile. "Sometimes people wander past the curtain when no one is watching." A man in seat 2C, Richard Palmer, gave a small laugh through his nose. He was 56, silver-haired, red-faced from the second glass of pre-flight champagne he had not yet earned. He leaned back like the cabin belonged to him by inheritance. Evelyn heard him. She heard everyone. The cough from seat 1B, the soft gasp from seat 4A, the click of a phone camera waking up, the ugly silence of decent people deciding whether decency was worth discomfort. Claire looked back at Evelyn. "You'll need to gather your things." Evelyn did not move. "I am in my assigned seat." Claire tapped the boarding pass with one polished fingernail. "This needs to be verified." "It was verified at the gate. I said it needs to be verified." There was no raised voice from Evelyn, no shaking finger, no performance. She had spent more than 40 years in classrooms full of children who came in carrying hunger, anger, grief, and the hard little defenses of the world outside. She knew how to sit inside tension without letting it rule her. But this was not a classroom. This was a first-class cabin on a flight from Atlanta to Chicago. And every eye on her seemed to ask the same question. "How did you get here?" Evelyn folded her hands over the book in her lap. "Then verify it," she said. Claire's nostrils flared. A few minutes earlier, the cabin had been all soft leather and warm overhead light. The air smelled of coffee, floor polish, and expensive perfume. The passengers had boarded with that quiet confidence people carry when they believe the world has been arranged for them. Evelyn had boarded slowly. Her knees were not what they used to be. The jet bridge had felt longer than usual. She had placed one hand against the wall for balance, then smiled at the young gate agent who scanned her pass. "Mrs. Brooks," the agent had said, glancing at the screen. Something had changed in the young woman's face then. A small flash of recognition, a little straightening of posture. "Welcome aboard. We're very glad to have you with us." Evelyn had smiled back. "Thank you, baby." No one behind her had noticed. No one ever noticed the small moments that mattered until the large ones became impossible to ignore. Now, in the cabin, Claire held Evelyn's boarding pass as if the paper had insulted her. Across the aisle, a younger flight attendant named Monica Reed stood half hidden near the galley. She was 36, with kind eyes and the careful posture of someone who had learned when to disappear. She had seen the pass. She had seen Evelyn board. She had seen Claire's face change the moment the older black woman settled into seat 3A. Monica's thumb pressed against the edge of the service cart. "Say something," her conscience whispered. Her paycheck answered first. "Not yet." Claire stepped closer to Evelyn. Mom, I'm going to ask you one more time. Do you understand that this cabin is reserved for first-class passengers? Evelyn looked at her. I understand exactly where I am. Richard Palmer shifted in his seat. Oh, come on, he muttered. Just sort it out and let us leave. Claire took that as permission. People like Claire often did. They heard one impatient man and mistook him for the voice of the room. She leaned down. Mrs. Brooks, if that is even your name, we have procedures. That was when Evelyn's fingers moved to the gold airplane pin on her collar just for a second. A small touch, a private anchor. Her late husband Samuel had given it to her nearly 25 years ago, on the morning their son started his first airline job. He had been a baggage handler then. 23 years old, strong hands, tired eyes, big dreams he did not yet know how to say out loud. Samuel had pinned it on Evelyn's dress and said, "One day that boy is going to do more than load bags." Evelyn had laughed then, but Samuel had been right. More right than anyone in this cabin knew. Claire thrust the boarding pass back toward Evelyn. I don't like your attitude. Evelyn took it. My attitude has been sitting quietly in the seat I paid for. A phone lifted in row 4. Monica saw it. Claire saw it too. Her face tightened, but she did not retreat. Pride is a dangerous thing in a uniform. It can make a person confuse authority with truth. Captain Mercer may need to be involved, Claire said. Then involve him, Evelyn replied. The calm in her voice was not weakness. It was restraint. And restraint, in the hands of someone who has survived much worse than embarrassment, can be terrifying. Claire turned sharply and walked toward the cockpit. Her heels struck the aisle carpet with short, angry steps. Tap, tap, tap. Every sound seemed louder now. A champagne bubble popped in a glass. Someone swallowed. The air vent hissed above Evelyn's head. Richard Palmer looked away, but not before Evelyn caught the satisfaction fading from his face into something less certain. Monica stayed frozen by the galley. She wanted to move, wanted to tell the captain what she had seen, wanted to say the older woman had done nothing wrong. But fear has a voice too. It says, not your fight. It says, keep your job. It says, maybe it will pass. Evelyn looked down at her book, but the words had blurred. Not from tears. She would not give this cabin tears. She thought of the thousands of children she had taught, children who learned early that some rooms would question them before they spoke, children she had told again and again to stand straight, know their worth, and never let someone else's ignorance become their identity. Now the lesson had come back to test the teacher. The cockpit door opened. Captain Alan Mercer stepped out. He was 58, tall, broad-shouldered, with gray at the temples and the practiced expression of a man used to being obeyed. Claire stood just behind him, her lips pressed into a thin line. He did not look at Evelyn first. He looked at Claire. What do you need? And with those 4 words, Evelyn understood. The trial had started before she was allowed to testify. Captain Mercer turned to her at last. Mom, he said, voice firm, we need to resolve this quickly. Evelyn held his gaze. Yes, she said, we do. Captain Mercer stood in the aisle with one hand resting on the top of the seat beside him, as if the aircraft itself had placed him there to judge her. Evelyn Brooks sat still. Her boarding pass lay flat across her palm. The paper was real. The seat was real. The humiliation was real, too. Claire Whitman hovered behind the captain, close enough to look official, far enough to avoid being questioned first. Her lips were pressed tight. Her eyes moved across the cabin, checking who was watching, who was recording, who might be useful. Most people looked away. That was the part Evelyn knew too well. Not hatred. Not always. Sometimes the deeper wound came from people who knew better and chose comfort. Captain Mercer cleared his throat. Mrs. Brooks, my crew tells me there is an issue with your seat assignment. Evelyn did not blink. Your crew is mistaken. Claire gave a short breath, almost a laugh. Captain, the system flagged the seat. Evelyn turned her eyes to Claire, then show him the flag. Claire's jaw moved. That is not how our internal process works. Captain Merce lifted one hand. Let's not argue policy in the aisle. It became policy, Evelyn said, when she used it to move me. The captain's face tightened. He was not used to being answered with calm precision. Anger he could dismiss. Tears he could manage. But dignity made him uncomfortable, because dignity asked him to be better than his first assumption. He looked down at her boarding pass. May I see that? Evelyn handed it to him. He glanced at it for less than 2 seconds. Seat 3A. First class. Her name imprinted clearly, Evelyn Brooks. Still, he did not hand it back right away. He looked at Claire instead. Is there another passenger assigned here? Claire straightened. There was a late adjustment. From the gate, Claire hesitated. It came through the cabin manifest. Monica Reed, near the galley, felt her stomach drop. That was not true. She had seen the manifest. She had checked it during boarding. 3A had one name, Evelyn Brooks. No duplicate, no late change, no note, nothing. Her fingers tightened around the handle of the service cart. Say it. Her throat closed. Captain Mercer noticed Monica shift. His eyes flicked toward her. Monica? She froze. Claire turned fast. Just a glance. But it was enough. A warning. Monica swallowed. Her voice came out small. I haven't seen the updated manifest, Captain. Not a lie. Not the truth. Something weaker than both. Evelyn heard it. She did not look at Monica. That almost made it worse. Captain Mercer turned back to Evelyn. Mom, at this point, we need to keep the boarding process moving. If there is a seating conflict, we can accommodate you elsewhere, and customer service can address compensation after landing. Evelyn's hands rested open in her lap. Captain, I am not asking for compensation. I am asking not to be removed from a seat I paid for. Richard Palmer shifted forward again. Captain, with respect, some of us have connections. This has gone on long enough. The captain gave him a small nod. That nod was small, but it told the cabin whose inconvenience mattered. Across the aisle, a woman named Margaret Ellis sat in seat 4A with her tablet on her lap and her reading glasses halfway down her nose. She was 68, a retired federal judge from Virginia, though no one on that plane knew it. She had spent a lifetime listening for what people avoided saying. She watched Claire's face. Then the captain's, then Evelyn's. Something was wrong, not messy, not confusing, wrong. Margaret tapped her tablet awake and opened a note. 3A, Evelyn Brooks, boarding pass valid, no visible disturbance, crew escalating. She did not know yet whether she would use it, but by the habit of record keeping had never left her. Captain Mercer lowered his voice. Mrs. Brooks, I understand you feel singled out. Evelyn's eyes sharpened. No, I do not feel singled out. I was singled out. The words landed clean. No drama, no tremble, just fact. Claire stepped forward. Captain, this is exactly what I mean. She has been argumentative since she boarded. A soft sound moved through the cabin, a murmur. Not agreement exactly, more like relief. People liked simple labels, argumentative, difficult, disruptive. Once a person had a label, everyone else could stop thinking. Evelyn looked at Claire. I was reading a book. Claire's cheeks colored. You refused a crew instruction. I refused to be quietly mistreated. Captain Mercer's patience thinned. It showed in his shoulders first, then in his voice. Mom, I am responsible for the safety and order of this aircraft. And I am responsible for not surrendering my dignity just because someone put on a uniform. Silence. Even Richard stopped moving. The captain stared at her, and for the first time there was something like doubt in his eyes. It passed quickly. Pride closed over it. Mrs. Brooks, I'm going to give you a choice. You may accept a reassigned seat for this flight and file a complaint afterward. Or you may deplane and discuss this with gate personnel. Evelyn breathed in slowly. The cabin air felt cold now, dry, pressurized before takeoff, but already heavy with judgment. She looked past the captain to the front of the plane, beyond the soft lights and polished panels, beyond the curtain and the sealed door. She could almost see Samuel standing in their kitchen years ago, fastening that little gold pin to her dress. Wear it proud, Evie, she could hear his voice. Not loud, never loud. Samuel had been the kind of man who could carry pain without letting it make him cruel. He had worked double shifts. He had packed lunches before dawn. He had told their son Michael to keep his eyes up, even when the world tried to bend his neck down. Evelyn touched the pin once. Then she looked at the captain. I will not deplane. Claire exhaled sharply. Captain Mercer's face hardened. Then we will move you to an available seat in the main cabin. You are going to remove me from first class without proving any error. We are resolving a conflict. No, Evelyn said. You are choosing the easier story. That one struck him. Because somewhere under the uniform, under the authority, under the need to push back on time, Alan Mercer knew there was truth in it. But truth often arrives too late for people committed to a mistake. Claire reached toward the overhead bin. I'll get your bag. Evelyn's voice cut through the movement. Do not touch my belongings. Claire stopped. Evelyn stood slowly. Her knees protested, but she did not show it. She held the seat back for half a second, then straightened. Every camera in the cabin seemed to rise. A young man in row 5 whispered, "This is bad." His wife whispered back, "Don't get involved." Margaret Ellis heard that too. Her fingers tightened around her tablet. Evelyn slid her book into her purse. She folded the boarding pass once and placed it inside the front pocket, careful, deliberate, as if preserving evidence. Then she reached up and pulled down her carry-on. Monica took half a step forward. "Mom, I can help." Evelyn turned to her for the first time. There was no anger in her eyes. That made Monica feel smaller. "No, thank you, baby," Evelyn said softly. "I've carried heavier things than this." Monica's mouth trembled. Claire looked away. Captain Mercer stepped back, opening the aisle as though he were doing her a courtesy. He was not. Evelyn walked. 3 rows felt like 30. The leather seats, the champagne glasses, the soft white napkins, the silent faces. They passed beside her like exhibits in a museum of polished indifference. Richard Palmer stared at his lap. Margaret Ellis lifted her head and met Evelyn's eyes. For one brief second, Evelyn saw shame there, not enough to stop anything, but enough to hurt. At the curtain, Claire reached past her and pulled it open. The fabric whispered. A small sound, a cruel little ceremony. Evelyn stepped through. The main cabin was crowded, warmer, louder. People looked up from phones and boarding bags. They did not know the whole story. They only saw an older black woman being led from first class by a flight attendant and captain. And people often believe the picture before they ask about the frame. Claire stopped at row 28, middle seat, between a broad-shouldered man already and a woman by the window who hugged her purse closer when Evelyn arrived. Claire gestured. "This will be your seat." Evelyn looked at it, then back at Claire. "I want your full name." Claire's eyes flashed. "It's on my badge." And the captain's. "You can file a complaint after landing. I intend to." Claire leaned closer. Her voice dropped low enough that most passengers could not hear, but Evelyn could. "If you keep pushing this, I'll have security meet you in Chicago." Evelyn studied her face. There it was. Not service, not policy. Punishment. Evelyn sat down in the middle seat. Slowly, carefully. She tucked her bag beneath her feet because there was no room for dignity in row 28. Not the kind she had paid for anyway. Claire walked away. Captain Mercer returned to the front. The curtain fell shut. For a moment, Evelyn did nothing. Then she opened her purse, took out her phone, and stared at the screen. Her thumb hovered. She did not want to send it, not because she was afraid, because she knew what it would do to her son. She knew the wound those 3 words would open in him. But silence had already done enough damage for one morning. So Evelyn Brooks typed 3 words. It happened again. She sent the message. Then she placed the phone face down on her lap. In a glass tower in Chicago, 46-year-old Michael Brooks was about to read it, and the sky above that aircraft was about to change. Michael Brooks read the message twice. It happened again. The conference room around him kept moving for one more second. Papers shifted. A laptop fan hummed. Someone at the far end of the table was still talking about quarterly service metrics, pointing at a screen filled with neat blue charts and clean little arrows. Then Michael raised one hand. The room stopped. He was not a loud man. He never needed to be. At 46, he had learned that real authority did not announce itself. It changed the temperature. "Everyone out except Ethan," he said. Nobody asked why. Chairs slid back. Pens were gathered. A young analyst closed his laptop too quickly and nearly dropped it. The general counsel looked at Michael's face and decided whatever question she had could wait. Within 30 seconds, the glass-walled room was empty, except for Michael Brooks and Ethan Parker, Crestline Airways chief operating officer. Ethan was 52, broad through the shoulders, with tired eyes and the permanent calm of a man who had spent half his life solving problems at airports. He had seen weather delays, mechanical failures, crew shortages, angry passengers, and executives who panicked at the first sign of public embarrassment. Michael was not panicking. That worried him more. "What happened?" Ethan asked. Michael placed his phone on the table and turned it toward him. Ethan read the message. His expression changed slowly. Not surprise. Recognition. "Oh no," he said under his breath. Michael's eyes stayed on the screen. She is on flight 218 out of Atlanta. First class, seat 3A. Ethan was already pulling out his tablet. Crestline medal? Yes. Crew? Find out. Ethan's fingers moved fast. The tablet lit his face in pale blue. The silence between them had weight. Outside the glass, employees pretended not to look in. Michael stood at the window, staring down at Chicago traffic. Tiny cars moved along the streets like nothing had happened. Like an old woman had not just been stripped of dignity inside an aircraft carrying his company's name across the side. His mother's company, in a way. That was what people never understood. Crestline Airways was not born in a boardroom, not to him. It had begun with his father's lunchbox, his mother's second-hand coats, long nights at Atlanta airports, his own hands lifting luggage in the rain, the smell of jet fuel soaked into his uniform, the ache in his back. The first paycheck he brought home and placed on the kitchen table while Evelyn tried not to cry. Now he owned the airline. But his mother had paid for part of it before he ever signed a stock certificate. Ethan looked up. Crew lead is Claire Whitman, 13 years with the company. Captain Alan Mercer, senior pilot. Flight is still at the gate to schedule tour for departure in 12 minutes. Passenger record. Ethan tapped again. Evelyn Brooks, seat 3A, paid first class, just 6 weeks ago. No upgrade, no miles, no standby, full fare. Any seat change? No. Any security flag? Ethan looked up. No. Michael's jaw tightened. Ethan kept scrolling. There is a cabin note entered 4 minutes ago. Read it. Ethan hesitated. Michael turned. Read it. Ethan's voice lowered. Passenger in 3A reassigned due to manifest discrepancy. Passenger became argumentative when asked to cooperate. Michael closed his eyes, just for one breath. When he opened them, the softness was gone. Who entered it? Claire Whitman. Michael picked up his phone and called Operations Control. The answer came on the first ring. Operations, this is Dana. Dana, this is Michael Brooks. The woman's voice changed instantly. Yes, Mr. Brooks. Flight 218 in Atlanta. Hold it at the gate. Do not close the door. Do not release the brake. Do not push back. I want a ground supervisor at that aircraft now. Quietly. There was a beat of silence. Yes, sir. And Dana, yes, sir? No one on that crew is to be warned why. Another pause. Understood. Michael ended the call. Ethan was already standing. I'll get legal and internal security. No, Michael said. You and I go first. One legal observer. 2 internal security staff in plain clothes. No theater. Ethan studied him. You are going there personally. Michael looked at him. My mother is sitting in a main cabin middle seat on an aircraft she owns more of than anyone in that cabin knows. The words were quiet. They landed like a hammer. Ethan nodded once. Then we move. Back on the aircraft, Evelyn Brooks sat between 2 strangers while the cabin prepared to leave. The man on her left was built like a retired linebacker. His elbows claimed more space than they needed. He looked straight ahead with a tight expression, the kind people wear when they do not want to be involved, but want you to know they resent your existence. The woman by the window was in her early 60s, with a small silver cross around her neck. She kept glancing at Evelyn's cheek, then at the curtain, then at her own hands. Twice she opened her mouth. Twice she closed it. Evelyn noticed. She noticed everything. Claire walked past once without looking at her. The air from her movement brushed Evelyn's sleeve, a small, sharp reminder. From the first-class cabin, laughter tried to return. It failed. It came in pieces, a forced chuckle, a glass set down too hard. Richard Palmer cleared his throat so many times that even he seemed irritated by the sound. Margaret Ellis had not stopped watching. She had added more notes. Passenger removed to row 28. No evidence presented. Captain accepted crew statement without review. Potential discriminatory treatment. Her thumb hovered over the camera icon. She had spent decades believing in procedure. Procedure mattered. Evidence mattered. Order mattered. But she also knew procedure could be used as a curtain. And behind that curtain, cruelty could work in peace. She looked toward Monica Reed. Monica stood near the galley, pale under her warm brown skin. Her eyes were wet. Her hands moved through service tasks with the stiffness of someone trying not to fall apart. Margaret lowered her tablet. Miss, she said softly. Monica turned. Yes, Mom? Was there really a manifest issue? Monica's lips parted. Claire was near the front, speaking with Captain Mercer. Not close enough to hear. Maybe. Monica looked down the aisle toward row 28, then back at Margaret. I'm not the person to ask. Margaret's gaze did not move. That is not the same as no. Monica's face tightened with shame. No, Mom, she whispered. It is not. Before Margaret could respond, the aircraft phone chimed in the galley. Claire picked it up. This is Claire. Her expression shifted, first impatience, then confusion, then something colder. Yes, we are ready to close. She listened. Her eyes moved to Captain Mercer.
What do you mean hold at the gate?
Several passengers looked up. Captain Mercer stepped toward her. Claire covered the receiver. Operation says we are not cleared to close. Ground supervisor coming aboard. The captain frowned.
For what?
I don't know, but she did know something. People who have done wrong often recognize the sound of consequence before it enters the room. In row 28, Evelyn felt her phone buzz. She turned it over. One message from Michael. Stay seated. I am coming. Her throat tightened. For the first time that morning, her composure nearly cracked, not because she needed saving. She had survived too much to think of herself that way. But because being believed, without having to prove her pain first, can break a person open. The woman by the window finally spoke. Mom, she said, voice trembling. I saw them bring you back here. I don't know what happened before that, but it didn't feel right. Evelyn looked at her. The woman swallowed. I should have said something. The man on the aisle shifted, uncomfortable. Evelyn's voice was gentle, but not soft enough to let anyone hide. Most people decide what is right after they decide what it will cost them. The woman's eyes filled. I'm sorry. Evelyn nodded once, then, remember this feeling. It can make you braver next time. At the front of the plane, the boarding door reopened. A hard rectangle of airport light cut into the cabin. The sounds of the jet bridge entered first. Footsteps, firm, fast, controlled. Claire turned toward the door. Captain Mercer straightened his jacket. Monica stopped breathing. A man stepped aboard in a dark navy suit. No flashy watch, no entourage, no raised voice. Just presence. Ethan Parker followed behind him with a tablet in one hand. 2 internal security staff came next. Quiet, observant. The man in the navy suit looked down the aisle. His eyes passed over Claire, over the captain, over the first-class passengers, then toward the curtain. Claire forced a professional smile. Sir, I'm sorry, we're in the middle of boarding procedures. May I help you? Michael Brooks looked at her badge, then at her face. Yes, he said. His voice was calm enough to make the cabin colder. You can start by telling me why Evelyn Brooks is no longer sitting in seat 3A. Claire Whitman stared at Michael Brooks as if his question had come from the wrong mouth. For half a second, she did not answer. The cabin waited. Even the air seemed to pause. Captain Mercer stepped forward first, trying to reclaim the authority that had always been his inside an aircraft. Sir, I'm Captain Alan Mercer. We have a passenger seating matter under control. Michael did not look away from Claire. Under control is not the phrase I would use. Claire's hand tightened around the phone receiver before she set it back into the cradle. Her professional smile returned, but it had lost its shape. Mr. Brooks, I assume you're with corporate operations? Ethan Parker looked up from his tablet. You could say that. Claire glanced at Ethan, then back at Michael. Something in her face changed again. She was searching memory now. Internal announcements, company newsletters, executive videos she had ignored because they did not concern her daily work. Then recognition hit. It did not arrive all at once. It spread from her eyes, to her mouth, to her hands. Michael Brooks, Chief Executive Officer, Crestline Airways. The name moved through the first-class cabin before anyone said it out loud. A whisper from row 2, another from row 4. A phone screen turned toward a seatmate. The quiet became sharp. Captain Mercer's face stiffened. Mr. Brooks, he said, and this time the title carried weight. I wasn't aware you were joining us. I wasn't scheduled to. Michael finally turned to him. That changed when my mother texted me from row 28. The words dropped into the cabin. My mother. Claire blinked. Richard Palmer sat up so fast his champagne glass trembled against the tray table. Monica Reed covered her mouth with one hand. Margaret Ellis closed her eyes for a moment, not in surprise but in sorrow. Because now everyone understood. Now everyone cared. Not when Evelyn was simply an old woman. Not when she had a valid ticket. Not when she was humiliated in front of them. Only now. Because she belonged to someone powerful. Michael seemed to read that thought across the room. He looked slowly over the passengers. I want all of you to understand something, he said. Her being my mother should not be the reason this matters. Nobody moved. She had a ticket. That should have been enough. Claire's lips parted. Sir, with respect, there was a manifest discrepancy. Michael held out one hand. Ethan. Ethan stepped into the aisle and turned his tablet toward the captain and Claire. There was no manifest discrepancy, he said. Seat 3A, Evelyn Brooks. Full fare first class. Purchased 6 weeks ago. No duplicate assignment. No equipment swap. No customer service note. No gate reassignment. No security flag. Claire swallowed. The cabin device showed a concern. Ethan's eyes narrowed. No, it didn't. Captain Mercer looked from Ethan to Claire. Claire? She turned on the captain with panic just under her skin. Captain, I acted based on what I believed was appropriate. The passenger was uncooperative. Michael's voice cut in. When did she become uncooperative? Claire looked at him. When she refused crew direction. What direction? To move. After you asked her to move from the seats she paid for. Claire's mouth opened, closed. Michael stepped one pace closer. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Let's walk through this carefully. Did you ask any other first-class passenger to show a boarding pass after they were seated? Claire looked down. No. Did you ask my mother more than once? Claire's face flushed. I was verifying. How many times? She said nothing. Michael waited. The waiting was worse than yelling. Finally, Claire said twice. Monica's voice came from the galley, thin but audible. 3 times. Claire turned toward her. Monica stood frozen, but this time she did not step back. Her eyes were wet. Her hands shook, but she stayed upright. Michael looked at her. Your name? Monica Reed.
Were you present during boarding?
Yes, sir. Did Mrs. Brooks cause a disturbance before being questioned? Monica's throat moved. No, sir. She was reading. Claire whispered, Monica. The warning was soft, ugly, familiar. Monica flinched, then looked at Evelyn's empty seat in 3A. Something inside her shifted. I saw the manifest, Monica said. There was no double booking. I didn't see any issue with her seat. A low murmur moved through the cabin. Captain Mercer's face changed. The certainty began to crack. Michael turned to him. Captain, did you personally verify the alleged issue before authorizing my mother's removal? Mercer's jaw tightened. I relied on my senior crew member. Did you ask my mother for her version of events? I spoke with her. That is not what I asked. The captain inhaled through his nose. No, not fully. Did you review her boarding pass? Yes. For how long? Mercer looked at the floor for the first time. Michael nodded once, as if entering the answer into an invisible record. Margaret Ellis stood in seat 4A. Her movement was slow, but the cabin felt it. Some people carry authority even when they are not wearing it. Mr. Brooks, she said. Michael turned. Yes, Mom? My name is Margaret Ellis. I'm a retired federal judge. I witnessed most of the exchange. Your mother remained calm. She presented her boarding pass. The crew escalated without showing evidence of a seating conflict. Claire's face went white. Margaret lifted her tablet. I took notes in real time. Richard Palmer muttered, This is getting ridiculous. Margaret turned her head toward him. No, sir. What was ridiculous was watching a woman be stripped of her seat while grown people pretended not to see it. Richard's mouth shut. Michael looked at Margaret. Thank you. She nodded, but there was no pride in it. Do not thank me too much. I should have spoken sooner. That sentence landed differently. It was not defense. It was confession. Michael turned toward the curtain. Where is she? No one answered quickly enough, so he walked. Ethan followed. Monica stepped aside. Claire stayed in the aisle as if her shoes had been nailed to the floor. The curtain opened. The main cabin looked up all at once. Rows of faces, phones in hands, half-buckled seat belts, the soft roar of air vents, the smell of coffee cooling in paper cups. Evelyn sat in row 28, middle seat, hands folded over her purse. She looked smaller there, not because she was small, but because the space had been designed to compress people. Knees, shoulders, breath. Michael stopped when he saw her. For one moment, he was not the chief executive officer of anything. He was a son, and she was his mother. The woman who had packed his lunches in paper bags and written his name on them when he was too old for it, just because she liked seeing it there. The woman who had ironed his first work shirt for the airport. The woman who had stood at the window the night of his first shift and waited until his bus disappeared. "Mom," he said. Evelyn looked up, her face softened. "Just a little, Michael." The woman by the window drew in a sharp breath. The man on the aisle stared straight ahead, suddenly very interested in his shoes. Michael crouched beside the row. "Are you all right?" Evelyn gave him the look only a mother can give a grown son in public. "I'm not injured. That is not what I asked." Her eyes glistened then, not with defeat, with the exhaustion of having to be strong one more time. "I am tired," she said. Michael nodded. His throat tightened, but his voice stayed steady. "I know." Evelyn touched his hand. "Don't turn this into a spectacle." He looked toward the front of the plane, where first class waited behind the curtain, like a room holding its breath. "It already is one," he said, "but we can still turn it into something useful." He stood and offered his hand. "Let's get you back to your seat." Evelyn looked at the aisle, at the passengers watching, at the woman by the window who whispered, "I'm sorry," so softly it almost disappeared. Evelyn answered her anyway, "Be braver next time." Then she took her son's hand and stood. The walk back was different, not because Evelyn had changed. She had not. Same navy dress, same silver hair, same gold airplane pin. But now the aisle saw her, really saw her. People shifted their legs out of her way. A few lowered their phones. A man near row 16 removed his baseball cap as she passed, not with drama, but with shame. At the curtain, Michael held it open for her. Claire stood in first class, rigid and pale. Evelyn slipped through. The cabin that had watched her leave now watched her return. Michael guided her to seat 3A, her seat, the seat she had paid for, the seat no one had the right to take. Evelyn sat down slowly and placed her purse beside her feet. Michael faced the cabin. "My mother will remain in seat 3A, he said. "This aircraft will not depart until I understand exactly how she was removed from it." Claire whispered, "Mr. Brooks, I can explain." Michael turned to her. "Good," he said. Then his voice became colder. "Start with why you called my mother a person who wandered past the curtain." Claire Whitman opened her mouth, but no words came out. For the first time that morning, the cabin saw what fear looked like on the face of someone who had been handing it to others. Her fingers trembled near the edge of the galley counter. The polished confidence was gone, the bright authority, the sharp smile. All of it had drained from her face, leaving only a woman in a uniform who suddenly understood that uniforms do not protect lives forever. "I didn't mean it that way," she said. Michael Brooks did not move. "How did you mean it?" Claire looked around the cabin, searching for help. Richard Palmer looked down at his glass. Captain Mercer stared at the aisle carpet. Monica Reed stood near the galley, wiping her palms against her skirt.
No one rescued her.
That was new for Claire. "I was trying to keep order," she said. Evelyn sat in seat 3A, hands folded over her book. Her face was calm, but her eyes were tired, not weak, not broken. Tired in the way only people become tired, when they have spent a lifetime hearing excuses dressed up as explanations. Michael's voice stayed even. "You called a paying passenger a person who wandered past the curtain." Claire swallowed. "I made a poor choice of words." "No," Michael said. "A poor choice of words is calling coffee warm when it is cold. What you did was tell this cabin she did not belong here." The silence deepened. Every person in first class understood the difference. Claire's eyes reddened. I was under pressure. Boarding was hectic. The cabin was full. Evelyn turned her head slightly toward the window. Outside, the jet bridge light glowed against the morning gray. Ground crew moved below in orange vests, unaware that inside the aircraft, a different kind of labor was happening. The hard work of telling the truth. Michael glanced at Ethan. "Show me the timeline." Ethan stepped forward, tablet in hand. Boarding pass scanned at the gate at 6:42 in the morning. Seat 3A confirmed. No exception, no flag, no duplicate. Passenger boarded at 6:51. Cabin note entered at 7:13 by Claire Whitman. It states manifest discrepancy and passenger argumentative. Michael turned back to Claire. "What happened between 6:51 and 7:13? Claire's mouth tightened. She seemed confused about the cabin. Evelyn looked at her then. "I found my seat without assistance." A few passengers shifted. Claire pressed on. "I had concerns based on behavior." "What behavior?" Michael asked. She was dismissive. Margaret Ellis stood again. She was reading. Claire's eyes flashed. "With respect, Mom, you were not part of the crew." Margaret's voice stayed soft, but it cut clean. "No, I was part of the audience you performed for. That landed hard. Claire looked away. Michael nodded toward Margaret, then back to Claire. Did my mother raise her voice? Claire hesitated. No.
Did she threaten anyone?
No. Did she refuse to show identification or her boarding pass? No, but she questioned my instructions. Evelyn spoke before Michael could, because your instructions were wrong. Claire's face twisted, caught between shame and anger. Passengers do not get to decide what crew instructions are valid. Captain Mercer stepped in, his voice controlled but strained. That is true. Federal regulations require passengers to comply with crew member instructions. Michael turned to him, lawful instructions related to safety. The captain blinked. Michael continued. Not instructions invented to cover an employee's bias. Not instructions used to remove a passenger from a seat without evidence. Captain, you know the difference. Mercer's shoulders stiffened. Mr. Brooks, with respect, in the moment we have to make decisions quickly, and quickly became carelessly. The captain took that like a blow. Michael stepped closer, not aggressive, but unavoidable. You had time to ask my mother what happened. You had time to look at the manifest. You had time to call the gate. You had time to review the seat map. You had time to notice that the only passenger being treated as a problem was the 73-year-old black woman sitting quietly with a book. No one breathed for a moment. Then from row 2, Richard Palmer muttered, "This is not about race." Evelyn closed her eyes. Michael turned slowly. Richard realized too late that silence would have served him better. Michael looked at him.
Were you involved?
Richard lifted his chin, trying to recover the old confidence. I simply said we needed to get moving. Some of us have schedules. Michael's eyes stayed on him. My mother had a schedule too. Richard scoffed under his breath. That is not what I meant. What did you mean? Richard's face reddened. I meant that the situation was disruptive. The situation, Michael repeated. Not the person creating it. Not the crew member who invented a manifest issue. Not the captain who failed to verify it. The situation. Richard looked away. Michael let the silence sit on him. That was the thing about truth. When spoken calmly, it did not need to chase anyone. It waited until they ran into it. Monica stepped forward. Her movement was small, but everyone saw it.
Mr. Brooks.
Claire turned sharply. Monica, don't. Monica flinched. Then she inhaled. No, I need to. Michael faced her. Monica's voice shook, but it did not break. I saw Mrs. Brooks bored. I saw Claire look at her differently. I saw her skip service at row 3. I saw her ask for the boarding pass more than once. I knew there was no duplicate seat, Claire whispered. You don't know what you saw. Monica's eyes filled. Yes, I do. Her words came faster now, pulled by something stronger than fear. I knew, and I stayed quiet because I was afraid. Afraid of being labeled difficult, afraid of losing trips, afraid of being the only black crew member who made it about race. So I told myself maybe it would pass. She looked at Evelyn. I am sorry, Mrs. Brooks. Evelyn did not answer at once. The cabin seemed to lean toward her. When she spoke, her voice was low and steady. Fear is real, Miss Reed. I will not pretend it is not. Monica wiped one tear with the back of her hand. But fear cannot be where our responsibility ends. Somebody always pays for our silence. Today it was me. Another day it may be someone with no sun coming through that door. The words moved through the cabin like a slow bell. Even Captain Mercer lowered his eyes. Ethan Parker spoke quietly into his phone near the boarding door. Then he returned to Michael's side. Atlanta station manager is on the way. Replacement lead attendant is available. We can remove Ms. Whitman from duty now. Claire's face changed. Remove me? For this? Michael looked at her. For falsifying a cabin note. For mistreating a passenger. For escalating without evidence. For using language that degraded a customer in front of witnesses. For threatening security when she asked for your name. Claire's voice cracked. I never threatened her. The woman who had sat beside Evelyn in row 28 suddenly appeared at the curtain. She was pale, clutching her purse strap. Yes, you did. Everyone turned. The woman looked terrified, but she kept speaking. I heard it. You leaned down and told her security would meet her in Chicago if she kept pushing. Claire stared at her. The woman's voice trembled. I should have spoken then. I'm speaking now. Evelyn looked at her, and something like relief passed across her face. Not because the woman had saved her. Too late for that. But because someone had chosen to become braver before the story ended. Michael nodded. Thank you, Mom. The woman stepped back, shaking. Ethan signaled to the two internal security staff. They approached Claire with calm professionalism. Not force, not humiliation, just procedure. Ms. Whitman, Ethan said, you are relieved of duty pending investigation. Please collect your personal items and surrender your crew badge and come advice to the station manager at the gate. Claire looked at Captain Mercer for help, for protection, for the old order to return. But Captain Mercer did not speak. He could not. Claire's eyes hardened then, not with power, but with the last defense of the exposed. You're ruining my career over one passenger. Michael's face did not change. No, Ms. Whitman. You placed your career in danger when you forgot that one passenger is still a human being. Claire looked at Evelyn. For the first time, she really looked. Not at the dress, not at the purse, not at the skin, at the woman. But recognition that arrives after a consequence is not the same as respect. Evelyn held her gaze. Claire looked away first. The security staff escorted her toward the door. Her heels, once sharp and commanding, now sounded uneven against the floor.
Tap. Pause.
Tap. At the aircraft door, she stopped like she wanted to say something. No apology came. She stepped into the jet bridge and disappeared. The cabin did not applaud. It would have been the wrong sound. Instead, there was only quiet, a heavy quiet, a necessary one. Michael turned to Captain Mercer. Now, he said, we need to talk about you. Captain Alan Mercer did not answer right away. He stood in the aisle with his shoulders squared, but the strength had gone out of his posture. Without Claire beside him, without the easy certainty of crew authority, he looked older, not weak, just exposed. The first-class cabin watched him the way people watch a man standing too close to the edge of something. Michael Brooks waited. He did not rush him. That made the silence worse. Captain Mercer finally cleared his throat. Mr. Brooks, I made the decision I thought was necessary to protect the order of the flight. Michael nodded once. Order is important. The captain seemed relieved for half a second. Then Michael continued, but order without fairness is just control. The captain's face tightened. Ethan Parker stood a few steps behind Michael, tablet lowered now. He had seen many executives handle public failures. Some yelled. Some tried to bury the facts. Some spoke in slogans. Michael did none of that. He held the moment still and made everyone look at it. Captain Mercer looked toward Evelyn. Mrs. Brooks, I regret that you felt mistreated. Evelyn's eyes lifted. The apology hung there, thin and unfinished. Michael turned slightly. Captain. Mercer looked back at him. That was not an apology. That was a sentence designed to survive a legal review. A few passengers shifted in their seats. The captain flushed. I'm trying to be careful. Try being honest. The words were quiet. They still struck hard. Captain Mercer inhaled, slow and deep. His training had taught him how to handle engine failures, medical emergencies, angry travelers, storms over the Midwest. It had not taught him how to stand in front of a cabin and admit that he had failed a woman who had done nothing wrong. He looked at Evelyn again, this time longer. Mrs. Brooks, he said, and his voice was lower now. I did not listen to you. I accepted my crew member's version of events because it was easier and faster. I allowed that to become your problem. That was wrong. Evelyn studied him. There was no triumph in her face, only the weight of the morning. Thank you for saying that. Captain Mercer nodded, but Michael was not finished. Captain, are you aware that before a passenger is removed from a confirmed seat, especially before departure, there are verification steps?
Yes.
Did you follow them? Mercer looked down. No. Did you call the gate agent? No. Did you check the seat map yourself? No. Did you ask operations to confirm the alleged discrepancy? No. Did you ask why the only passenger being challenged was my mother? That question landed differently. Mercer's mouth tightened. No. Michael let the answer sit. No one needed him to explain it. The cabin understood. Sometimes what a person fails to ask reveals more than what they say. Margaret Ellis remained standing, one hand resting on the back of her seat. Her face was composed, but her eyes were wet now. She had spent years sentencing people, questioning witnesses, weighing facts. She knew that institutions loved words like process and discretion. She also knew that those words could become hiding places. She spoke gently. Captain, may I say something? Mercer looked at her, weary but attentive. Yes, Mom. I do not believe most harm begins with someone deciding to be cruel. Evelyn turned toward her. Margaret continued. Sometimes it begins when a person in power accepts the easiest explanation because it protects the structure around them. That is what frightens me. Not only what Ms. Whitman did, but how quickly the rest of us allowed it to become normal. The cabin stayed silent. Richard Palmer stared out the window, jaw clenched. The woman who had witnessed Claire's threat stood near the curtain. Still clutching her purse, she wiped at her eyes with one finger and stepped back into the main cabin, but not before looking at Evelyn again. The look was small, apologetic, human. Monica Reed stood by the galley, breathing unevenly. Michael turned to her. Miss Reed, she straightened. Yes, sir. You told the truth when it became difficult. That matters. Monica shook her head quickly. Not soon enough. No, Michael said, not soon enough. She flinched, but he did not say it cruelly. He continued. But soon enough to choose who you want to be next. That broke something in her. Not loudly, not dramatically. Her face folded. She pressed her fingers to her lips and looked toward Evelyn. I am so sorry, she whispered. I saw it happening and I made myself small. Evelyn's voice softened. Sometimes people make themselves small because someone taught them it was safer. Monica nodded through tears. But safety can become a cage. Evelyn gave a faint, sad smile. Yes, baby, it can. For a moment, the aircraft did not feel like a machine waiting to depart. It felt like a room where people had finally stopped performing. Then the station manager arrived. Her name was Denise Howard. She was in her late 40s, dressed in a navy blazer with a Crestline badge clipped near her shoulder. She stepped aboard with the alert expression of someone who had been briefed just enough to know she was walking into something serious. Mr. Brooks, she said. Michael nodded. Denise, thank you for coming quickly. She glanced at Evelyn, then at the empty space where Claire had stood. I have a replacement lead attendant ready at the gate. I can also replace the entire forward cabin crew if needed. Michael looked at Evelyn. It was her pain, her seat, her mourning. For once, someone in authority asked without words. Evelyn understood. She shook her head slightly. No need to punish people for being near the fire, she said. Only the ones who lit it and the ones who waved others toward it. Monica lowered her eyes. Captain Mercer absorbed the sentence like it had been written for him. Michael turned back to Denise. Replace the lead. Keep Miss Reed on board if she is willing. Document everything. Preserve cabin notes, cruise device logs, gate scan records, and any passenger statements offered voluntarily. No one is to pressure passengers to delete videos. Denise nodded. Yes, sir. Richard Palmer shifted hard in his seat. Are we going to be delayed much longer? The question came out sharper than he intended, or maybe exactly as sharp as he intended. Every head turned. Michael looked at him with the calm of a man who had no reason to hurry past disrespect.
What is your name, sir?
Rich blinked. Richard Palmer. Mr. Palmer, you were eager for my mother to move because you had somewhere to be. Richard's cheeks reddened. I was speaking generally. Michael nodded. Generally is where cowardice likes to hide. The cabin went still again. Richard opened his mouth, then closed it. Evelyn looked at her son. Michael, one word, not a warning, a reminder. He looked back at her, and some of the steel in him softened. She did not want revenge. She wanted repair. There was a difference, and she had raised him to know it. Michael took a breath. Then he faced Richard again. You are not responsible for what Ms. Whitman did. But when you used your impatience to strengthen her hand, you helped make the wrong thing easier. That is worth thinking about. Richard's eyes dropped. For the first time, he seemed smaller than his seat. Denise stepped aside as a new lead attendant entered. A man named Carlos Ramirez, mid-50s, calm face, silver at the temples. He walked straight to Evelyn's row and stopped at a respectful distance. Mrs. Brooks, he said, my name is Carlos. I'll be taking over service in first class. I'm sorry for what happened here. May I get you some water, coffee, or tea before we prepare to leave? The question was ordinary. That was what made it powerful. No suspicion, no performance, just service. Evelyn looked at him. Hot tea would be nice. Carlos nodded. Yes, Mom. As he moved toward the galley, Michael leaned down beside his mother. I can take you off this flight. I can have a car ready. We can get you home. Evelyn shook her head. I bought a ticket to Chicago, I know. Then I am going to Chicago. His eyes searched her face. After all this? She placed one hand over his, especially after all this. Michael looked at the gold airplane pin on her collar. The tiny wings had shifted slightly during the morning. He reached out and straightened it with care. Evelyn smiled. Your father would have had plenty to say today. Michael let out a breath that almost became a laugh. He would have started with language we cannot use in front of these people. For the first time, Evelyn's smile grew real. Small, but real. The cabin felt it. Not relief exactly, something better. A reminder that harm does not get the final word unless people let it. Michael stood. He looked at Denise, Ethan, Captain Mercer, Monica, Margaret, and the waiting rows behind them. This flight will leave when the required reports are filed and the crew is reset. Mrs. Brooks will fly in seat 3A. Any passenger who wishes to provide a statement may do so with the station manager. No retaliation, no pressure, no edits. He paused, then his voice lowered. And from this moment forward, every person on this aircraft will be treated like they belong here until facts prove otherwise. Not the other way around. No one spoke, but this time, the silence did not feel like fear. It felt like a line had been drawn, and everyone knew which side they were standing on. The reports were filed in the jet bridge, not in some private office where language could be softened and responsibility could be sanded down. Denise Howard stood near the aircraft door with her tablet in both hands. Her face remained professional, but her eyes moved carefully. She was watching everything now, not just what people said, what they avoided, who looked away, who glanced toward Evelyn and then quickly down. Carlos Ramirez moved through the first-class cabin with quiet efficiency, no grand gestures, no nervous overcompensation. He poured hot water into a ceramic cup, added a small tray with lemon and honey, and set it beside Evelyn with both hands. Here you are, Mrs. Brooks, he said. Thank you, Evelyn replied, his eyes softened. You should not have had to ask twice to be treated correctly. Evelyn looked up at him. No, she said, I should not have. Carlos nodded once, accepting the truth without trying to decorate it. Then he moved on. That mattered. Some apologies make the injured person carry the weight of the other person's guilt. Carlos did not do that. He simply gave respect and stepped back. Michael noticed. So did Monica. She stood at the edge of the galley, watching Carlos work. For years, she had believed good service meant keeping the peace. Smile, smooth things over, avoid trouble. But now she saw how easily peace could become a polished word for silence. Captain Mercer had retreated toward the cockpit, but he had not disappeared. He stood just outside the door, speaking quietly with Denise. His hands were clasped behind his back. His face was pale, controlled, and deeply uncomfortable. Denise asked him questions in a low voice. What time did you enter the cabin? Approximately 7:16. Did you view the cabin manifest? No. Did you contact the gate? No. Did you authorize the passenger's relocation?
Yes. Did you document the reason before or after?
Captain Mercer paused after. Denise looked at him. That matters. I know. But he had not known then. That was the problem. A few passengers from first class came forward one at a time to give statements. Not all, not even most, but enough. The young man from row 5 said he had recorded part of the exchange. His voice shook when Denise asked whether he would share it with internal investigators. Yes, he said. I should have spoken up sooner. Margaret Ellis gave a precise account. Times, words, positions, tone. She did not exaggerate. She did not need to. The truth was strong enough without help. Richard Palmer stayed seated for as long as he could, pretending to read a financial magazine he had not turned a page of in 10 minutes. Then Michael stepped into the aisle near him. Mr. Palmer. Richard looked up slowly. Yes? You are not required to make a statement. I would rather not get involved. Michael's eyes held his. You already were. Richard's mouth tightened. I did not mistreat your mother, no. You made it easier for someone else to. Richard shifted in his seat. The leather creaked under him. I said what a lot of people were thinking. The flight was being delayed. Evelyn's teacup stopped halfway to her lips. Michael's voice remained calm.
Do you hear yourself?
Richard blinked.
You are still talking about the delay.
A woman was removed from a seat she paid for after being publicly humiliated, and your concern is that you lost time. Richard looked toward Evelyn, then away. I didn't know who she was. Evelyn set the cup down gently. There it was. The sentence everyone had been circling. Michael did not speak. Evelyn did.
You knew I was a passenger.
Richard's eyes flicked toward her. She continued, softer now, but somehow sharper. You knew I was old enough to be treated with patience. You knew I was alone. You knew I had a boarding pass in my hand. You knew enough. Richard's face changed. Not fully, not beautifully. Life is rarely that clean. But something in him gave way. His shoulders dropped. He swallowed. I'm sorry, he said. The words sounded strange coming from him. Rough, unpracticed. Evelyn looked at him for a long second. I hope you are. He nodded. This time, he did not look away. Denise finished collecting the first round of statements and walked to Michael. The replacement crew is set. We can release the flight if Captain Mercer remains in command, but he will be removed from duty pending review after arrival. Or we can replace him now.
That will mean a longer delay.
The cabin listened. Captain Mercer heard every word. He stepped forward before Michael answered. Mr. Brooks, he said. Michael turned. I am prepared to step off if that is what you decide. His voice was different now, less defended, more human. Evelyn watched him closely. Michael did too. Captain Mercer continued. I cannot undo what happened, but I can complete this flight safely, and when we land, I will submit to whatever review is appropriate. Michael studied him. You understand that command is more than flying the aircraft? Yes. Command is judgment? Yes. And today your judgment failed before the wheels ever moved. Mercer nodded. No excuse came this time. Yes. Michael looked at Evelyn. Again, he let the choice pass through her, not as burden, as respect. Evelyn folded her hands around the warm cup. Can he fly the plane safely? Michael answered honestly. Yes. She looked at the captain. Then fly the plane, Captain. But do not confuse being allowed to finish the job with being cleared of what you did. Captain Mercer bowed his head slightly. I understand, Mrs. Brooks. She held his gaze. I hope you do. Michael turned to Denise. Captain Mercer remains for this flight only. Formal review on landing. Full crew debrief. Passenger care team meets Mrs. Brooks at arrival, but no public relations approach without her consent. Denise nodded. Yes, sir. Evelyn gave her son a look. Michael, he already knew what that tone meant. No press unless you want it, he said. I do not want to be turned into a headline before I have had lunch. For the first time, a few people smiled. Not because it was funny. Because the room needed one breath that was not made of pain. Monica approached slowly. Mrs. Brooks? Evelyn turned. Monica held a small bottle of water in one hand and a napkin in the other. Her face was open now, frightened but open. I know Carlos brought your tea. I just wanted to ask if you need anything else before we leave. Evelyn looked at the water, then at Monica. You can sit with me for a moment. Monica froze.
Mom?
Just a moment. Monica glanced toward Michael. He stepped back, giving them space. She lowered herself into the empty aisle-side seat across from Evelyn, careful, as if she had not earned the right to sit comfortably. Evelyn leaned slightly toward her. I taught school for 42 years, she said. Do you know what I learned? Monica shook her head. That children notice who gets protected. They notice who gets corrected. They notice who is believed. Adults do too. We just pretend we don't. Monica's eyes filled again. I don't want to be that kind of person. Then do not make today only about guilt. Monica blinked. What do I do with it? Turn it into practice. The words were gentle, but they carried weight. Next time your stomach tells you something is wrong, believe it faster. Speak sooner, even if your voice shakes. Monica nodded, tears slipping down now. Yes, Mom. Evelyn handed her the napkin Monica had brought. Monica laughed once through the tears. A small broken sound. Evelyn smiled faintly. Healing can begin in strange places. The boarding door closed at last. The sound was soft, final. Captain Mercer's voice came over the intercom a minute later. It was steady, but those who knew what had happened could hear the humility beneath it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We are preparing for departure to Chicago. We apologize for the delay and appreciate your cooperation. He stopped there. No fake explanation. No blaming an unnamed passenger. No polished lie. Michael stood beside Evelyn's seat as the cabin lights shifted for departure. I should go, he said. She looked up at him.
You have a company to run.
I have a mother to protect. Evelyn touched his sleeve. You did protect me. Now, make sure the next woman does not need her son to be the CEO. That sentence entered him deeper than any command. He bent and kissed her forehead. I will. She held his hand for 1 second longer. Your father would be proud. Michael's face tightened with emotion. He nodded, unable to speak. Then he stepped into the aisle. As he walked toward the door, passengers watched him differently than they had watched Evelyn. Power has a way of making people attentive. At the front, he stopped and turned back. His eyes found his mother in seat 3A. She had opened her book again. The gold airplane pin shone on her collar. The same woman, the same seat, a different cabin. Michael stepped off the aircraft. The door closed behind him. Inside, the engines began their low rising hum. Evelyn looked down at the page, then up toward the window as the plane finally pushed back. She was still tired, still hurt, but she was not alone anymore. And sometimes that is where justice starts. The plane lifted out of Atlanta under a gray morning sky, and for a few minutes, no one in first class spoke above a whisper. The engines settled into their steady climb. The seatbelt sign glowed overhead. The city dropped away beneath the clouds, shrinking into silver roads and soft blocks of light. Inside the cabin, the air felt different now. Not peaceful, not yet. More like a room after a storm when everyone can still smell the rain. Evelyn Brooks sat in seat 3A with her book open in her lap. She had not read a word. Her eyes rested on the same sentence while her mind replayed the aisle, the curtain, Claire's voice, the middle seat in row 28, the woman whispering sorry, as if apology could travel backward in time. It could not, but it could still matter. Carlos Ramirez approached quietly. Mrs. Brooks, he said, leaning just enough to be heard. Would you like breakfast when we begin service? I can bring the menu, or if you prefer something simple, just say the word. Evelyn looked up. The question was ordinary, but after what had happened, ordinary felt almost tender. I think toast and fruit would be fine. Carlos nodded. I'll make sure it is fresh. He turned away, then stopped. And if you need a few minutes before anyone comes by again, I can give you that too. Evelyn studied him. There was no pity in his face, no forced sweetness, just attention. Yes, she said, a few minutes would be good. You have them? He moved on. Across the aisle, Richard Palmer sat rigid in seat 2C. His champagne was gone, but he had not asked for another. The empty glass remained on his tray table, like evidence of another version of him. A version that had laughed, a version that had rushed judgment, a version that had thought being inconvenienced was the same as being wronged. He glanced at Evelyn once, then away, then back. His mouth tightened. He wanted to say something. He also wanted to remain the kind of man who did not have to say anything. That was the fight happening behind his eyes. Margaret Ellis noticed it. She had moved to the aisle seat in row 4 after another passenger offered to trade. She could see both Evelyn and Richard now, and she watched with the patience of someone who knew remorse did not always arrive dressed in courage. Sometimes it came limping. Sometimes it needed help. She leaned slightly toward Richard. Mr. Palmer. He turned, startled. Yes? If you are waiting for the right words, there probably aren't any. His face flushed. Margaret continued, softer. But imperfect ones are usually better than silence. Richard looked at Evelyn again. His fingers tapped once against the armrest, then stopped. A few minutes passed. The seatbelt sign turned off with a soft chime. The sound seemed to release the cabin from its frozen posture. People shifted, bags opened, seatbacks adjusted, but first class remained careful, as if everyone had suddenly become aware that comfort is not the same as innocence. Richard unbuckled his seatbelt. He stood halfway, then sat back down. Margaret watched him over her glasses. He stood again. This time, he stepped into the aisle. Evelyn heard him before she saw him. The soft creak of leather shoes, the hesitant breath, the pause beside her row. Mrs. Brooks. She turned her head. Richard's face looked older up close, less polished. His silver hair was still neat, his suit still expensive, but the certainty had gone out of him. I owe you an apology. Evelyn did not make it easy for him. She simply waited. Richard swallowed. When I spoke earlier, I was thinking about myself, my schedule, my comfort. I saw what was happening, and instead of questioning it, I added pressure to you. That was wrong. His voice cracked on the last word, just slightly. Not enough for drama, enough for truth. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. Why did you do it? Richard blinked. He had prepared to apologize. He had not prepared to answer. I suppose I was annoyed. That is not the whole answer. He looked down. The cabin around them stayed quiet. Some passengers pretended not to listen. No one succeeded. Richard exhaled. I assumed, he said. Evelyn's eyes did not move. He forced himself to continue. I assumed the crew must have a reason. I assumed you were the problem because they treated you like the problem. There it was. Not a polished apology, a confession. Evelyn nodded once. That is how harm travels. One person starts it. Others carry it because they do not want to look too closely. Richard's eyes reddened. I am sorry. I hear you. He seemed to hope for more. Forgiveness? Maybe. Release, something clean. Evelyn did not give it quickly. Not to punish him, to teach him. I taught children for most of my life, she said. One thing I learned is that sorry is not the end of a lesson. It is where the lesson starts. Richard nodded. What should I do? Evelyn looked toward the aisle, toward the cabin, toward all the listening faces. Next time, spend your influence differently. Richard's mouth trembled. Yes, Mom. He returned to his seat quietly. Margaret looked at Evelyn, and the two women shared a glance. Not celebratory, not satisfied, just aware. Something small had shifted. Small things mattered. In the galley, Monica Reed stood with Carlos as he arranged breakfast trays. Her hands were steadier now, but her eyes remained swollen. Carlos glanced at her. You doing okay? She gave a faint laugh. No, that's probably appropriate. She looked at him. He placed a linen napkin on a tray. I've been flying 29 years, he said. I've seen good crews and bad crews. Most people want to think they speak up. Fewer do when it costs them something. Monica wiped the corner of her eye. I froze.
Yes.
She flinched. Carlos did not soften the truth, but he did soften his voice. And then you spoke. Now decide whether today becomes a wound you hide from or a scar you learn from. Monica looked toward Evelyn's seat. She asked me to turn guilt into practice.
She sounds like a teacher.
She was. Carlos smiled faintly. Still is. Monica picked up a tray, then set it down again. I need to write a statement. Carlos nodded, then write it clean. I don't want to make myself look better than I was. Good, he said. Don't. Monica took a breath and pulled a small notepad from her apron pocket. She began writing in careful lines. I saw Mrs. Brooks seated in 3A. I saw Claire Whitman skip service. I saw repeated verification requests. I did not speak. The pen stopped. Her hand shook. Then she wrote the next line. I knew it was wrong. In the cockpit, Captain Mercer kept his hands on the controls as the aircraft leveled off. The first officer, a younger man named Brian Cole, watched the instruments, then glanced sideways.
You all right, Captain?
Mercer stared at the horizon line. No, Brian did not speak. Mercer's jaw worked. I let speed matter more than judgment. The first officer looked forward again. After a moment, he said, that can happen. Mercer shook his head. That is the kind of sentence people use when they want to survive a review. Brian stayed quiet. Mercer exhaled. I'm going to write it down. Exactly. The cockpit hummed around them. Radio chatter, airflow, the soft beeps of systems doing what systems were designed to do. Machines followed checks. People had to choose them. Back in the cabin, Evelyn finally lifted her book. This time, she read one sentence, then another. The pain had not disappeared. It sat beside her like an uninvited passenger, but it no longer had the whole row. Margaret moved into the aisle and stopped beside seat 3A.
May I sit with you for a moment later?
She asked. Evelyn looked up. Yes. Margaret nodded. I was a judge for many years. I thought that made me brave. Evelyn closed the book gently around one finger.
And today?
Today reminded me that titles do not make us brave. Choices do. Evelyn's expression softened. Sit with me after breakfast. I would like that. Outside, the clouds opened. Sunlight broke across the wing, bright and sudden, turning the metal gold. Evelyn looked out at it. Her airplane pin caught the same light and flashed softly against her collar. For a moment, she thought of Samuel, not as a memory that hurt, as a presence that steadied. She could almost hear him. Keep your head up, Evie. She did. And around her, in small, uncomfortable ways, other people began learning to do the same. By the time the plane began its descent into Chicago, the cabin had changed in ways no passenger announcement could name. It was not cheerful, it was not fixed, but it was awake. Evelyn Brooks sat by the window with Margaret Ellis beside her now, after a quiet seat change that no one challenged. Margaret had moved into 3B with a cup of black coffee and a face full of things she had spent most of the flight thinking about. For almost an hour, the two women had talked in low voices, not about airline policy, not at first. They talked about teaching, about courtrooms, about husbands gone too soon, about the strange loneliness of growing older in a country that still expected certain people to keep proving they belong. Margaret held her cup with both hands. My husband used to say I could cross-examine a stone wall, she said. Evelyn smiled faintly. Did the wall confess? Usually. That made Evelyn laugh once, softly. The sound surprised her. It surprised Margaret, too. A small human sound in a cabin that had spent the morning holding its breath. Then Margaret's smile faded. I keep thinking about the moment I knew. Evelyn turned from the window. Knew what? That what was happening to you was wrong. Not questionable, not awkward. Wrong. She looked down at her coffee. And then I sat there, taking notes, like notes were courage. Evelyn studied her for a long moment. Notes can become courage if you use them. Margaret nodded. I did. Late. Late is not never. Margaret looked at her, grateful and ashamed at the same time. That is kinder than I deserve. Evelyn's voice softened.
Maybe.
But I am trying not to let what happened this morning turn me into someone who only knows how to measure blame. Margaret's eyes grew wet. That sounds hard. It is. Outside the window, Lake Michigan appeared under the clouds, gray water stretching wide and cold. Chicago rose beyond it, all steel and glass, half hidden by morning haze. Evelyn looked down at the city. Somewhere below, Michael would already be moving, calling, documenting, turning pain into memos, memos into policy, policy into consequences. That was how he worked. That was how he survived power without letting it swallow him. But Evelyn knew something Michael sometimes forgot. A policy could punish harm. Only people could heal it. In the galley, Monica Reed handed Carlos Ramirez her written statement. 3 pages, tight handwriting, no excuses. Carlos read the first few lines. His face stayed still, Swoop, but his eyes lifted. You wrote the hard parts. Monica nodded. I almost didn't, but you did. She leaned back against the galley wall and closed her eyes. I kept hearing her say somebody always pays for our silence. Carlos folded the pages carefully. That sentence will stay with you. It should. The aircraft dipped slightly. A soft chime sounded. Captain Mercer's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we have begun our descent into Chicago. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin for arrival. There was a pause, a longer one than usual. Then he spoke again, and to all passengers, thank you for your patience today. His voice tightened on the last word, not enough to break, enough to show he felt the weight of it. In the cockpit, Mercer removed his finger from the transmit button and stared forward. First Officer Brian Cole watched the runway data appear on the screen. You didn't blame the delay on a passenger, Brian said. Mercer gave a grim half-smile. No, some captains would have. I was that captain 2 hours ago. Brian tassered to nothing. Mercer looked through the windshield at the layered clouds ahead. I keep replaying it, he said. She told me I had already decided before hearing her. I hated that because it was true. Brian glanced over. What will you put in your report? Mercer swallowed. The truth. That may cost you. It should cost me something. The answer came quietly, not heroic, not dramatic. Just a man beginning to understand that accountability was not an attack. It was the price of being trusted again. Back in first class, Carlos collected cups and trays. When he reached Richard Palmer, Richard placed folded napkin on the tray with his glass. Carlos picked it up, then paused. There was writing on it. For Mrs. Brooks, if she will accept it. Carlos looked at Richard. Richard's face reddened. It's an apology, he said. Not for her to make me feel better, just because I should have written it. Carlos nodded. I'll ask her. He walked to Evelyn's row and leaned down. Mrs. Brooks, Mr. Palmer asked if I would give you this. He said it is an apology, only if you want it. Evelyn looked across the aisle. Richard sat stiff, eyes forward, hands clasped. She took the napkin. The handwriting was careful and uneven. Mrs. Brooks, I was wrong. I judged the situation by convenience instead of conscience. I treated your dignity as less important than my schedule. I am ashamed of that. You owed me nothing this morning, including patience. I will remember what you said. Next time, I will spend my influence differently. Richard Palmer. Evelyn read it twice. Then she folded it and placed it inside her book. Margaret watched her. Will you answer him? Evelyn looked out the window. Not today. Margaret nodded. That seems fair. It is not my job to finish his lesson for him. No, Margaret said, it is not. As the plane lowered through the clouds, the cabin lights brightened. Phones were put away. Seatbelts clicked. The ordinary rituals of arrival returned, but they no longer felt ordinary to the people who had been paying attention. Monica walked the aisle for final checks. When she reached Evelyn, she stopped.
Seatbelt secure, Mrs. Brooks?
Evelyn looked up. Yes, baby. Monica nodded, then hesitated. I filed my statement. I am glad. I told the truth. Evelyn held her gaze. Then you have already begun. Monica's eyes shone, but she kept her posture steady. Thank you. Evelyn shook her head slightly. Do not thank me. Just keep going. The landing gear lowered with a deep mechanical groan. The sound rolled under their feet. Several passengers looked out their windows as the runway came into view. Richard Palmer finally turned toward Evelyn. She felt it and looked back. He gave a small nod, not asking for forgiveness, not demanding response, just acknowledging her. Evelyn returned the nod. Small, measured, enough. The aircraft touched down with a firm bounce. Tires screamed against the runway. Engines roared in reverse. Bodies leaned forward and settled back. Chicago had received them. As the plane taxied, Captain Mercer spoke once more. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Chicago. We will be at the gate shortly. Please remain seated until the seatbelt sign has been turned off. His voice was calm. But in the cockpit, his hand stayed still on the throttle for an extra second after the announcement. He knew there would be people waiting at the gate. A chief pilot, a safety officer, maybe legal, maybe Michael Brooks himself. He felt fear, but beneath it something cleaner, readiness. At the gate, through the small oval window, Evelyn saw 3 Crestline employees waiting near the jet bridge. One of them was Denise Howard. Another held a folder. The third stood with the straight posture of someone from corporate security. No cameras, no crowd. Michael had listened. The plane stopped. The seatbelt sign chimed off. No one rushed forward. That was unusual. Usually first class rows as one body, impatient and entitled, hands already pulling bags from bins before the aisle was clear. This time, people waited. Maybe out of shame, maybe out of respect. Maybe because for once the person in seat 3A had earned the right to move first. Carlos stepped into the aisle. Mrs. Brooks, please take your time. Evelyn closed her book and placed it in her purse. She touched the gold airplane pin once, as she had done before. Then she stood. Margaret stood beside her. May I walk with you? Evelyn smiled. Yes. Richard Palmer remained seated as she passed. He did not speak. He simply lowered his head. Monica stood near the door. Her eyes met Evelyn's. This time she did not look away. Goodbye, Mrs. Brooks, Monica said. Evelyn stopped. Not goodbye, do better. Monica nodded. I will. Evelyn stepped into the jet bridge. The air was cooler there, metallic, still carrying the faint smell of rain and airport carpet. Denise Howard approached gently. Mrs. Brooks, I am Denise Howard, station manager. I am sorry for what you experienced today. We have a private room available if you would like a few minutes before your next steps. Your son asked us not to involve media or public relations unless you request it. Evelyn let out a quiet breath. Good. I raised him right. Denise smiled, then caught herself. Not because it was inappropriate, but because the moment deserved care. Yes, Mom, you did. Margaret handed Denise her contact information and statement notes. If your investigators need anything, call me. Denise read the card and looked up quickly. Judge Ellis? Retired, Margaret said. Still useful, Evelyn added. Margaret smiled. Behind them, passengers began to exit in a slower stream. Captain Mercer appeared at the aircraft door. He did not step past Evelyn. He waited. Mrs. Brooks, he said. She turned. He removed his cap. I will be submitting a full report. I know that does not repair what happened, but I wanted to say again, directly, I failed you today. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. Yes, she said, you did. He accepted it. No defense, she continued. Make sure the report teaches someone else what you learned too late. Mercer nodded. I will. Evelyn walked on. At the end of the jet bridge, Michael Brooks was waiting. Not with cameras, not with a crowd. Just standing there in his Navy suit, hands clasped in front of him, eyes searching her face. For a moment, she saw the boy he used to be. The one with the airport badge too big for his shirt. The one who came home smelling of rain and jet fuel. The one Samuel had believed in before the world knew his name. Michael stepped forward. Mom. Evelyn reached for him. He hugged her carefully, like she was precious, not fragile. She closed her eyes. For the first time all day, she let herself lean on someone. Only for a moment, then she pulled back. "I am hungry," she said. Michael laughed softly, the sound breaking through the tension in his chest. "I figured. And I do not want airport food." "Of course not." She looked toward the window where the Crestline aircraft sat at the gate. The plane looked ordinary from outside. White body, blue tail, clean logo. No one passing by would know what had happened inside. But Evelyn knew, Michael knew, and soon the company would know too. She touched the airplane pin on her collar. "Take me somewhere with real soup." Michael offered his arm. "Yes, Mom." As they walked through the terminal, people moved around them without knowing who they were. Just a mother and son. Just two travelers in a crowded American airport. But behind them, a record had begun. Statements, logs, reports, names, choices. And somewhere inside Crestline Airways, the first line of a new standard was already being written. A passenger does not have to prove they belong before being treated with dignity. 2 weeks after the flight, Michael Brooks sat at the head of a long conference table inside Crestline Airways headquarters. The room was silent, not the polite kind of silence. The kind that comes when people have run out of safe explanations. On the screen behind him were the findings from the internal review. Gate scans, cabin logs, crew device records, passenger statements, video clips, written reports. Every piece had been checked twice. Every timeline had been confirmed. There had been no manifest discrepancy, no duplicate seat, no safety concern, no valid reason to move Evelyn Brooks from seat 3A. Only an assumption, then a lie, then a system that almost protected both. Michael looked down the table at the senior executives. Some had worked in aviation for 30 years. Some had built careers on efficiency, on on-time departures, on customer experience scores that looked impressive in quarterly reports. Now those numbers felt thin. A woman had been humiliated inside one of their aircraft, and the company almost called it procedure. Ethan Parker stood beside the screen. Claire Whitman entered a false cabin note after the passenger challenged the removal. Prior complaint records showed 2 earlier incidents involving similar treatment of passengers in premium cabins. Both were closed as misunderstandings. No one spoke. Ethan clicked to the next slide. Captain Mercer failed to complete required verification before authorizing the seat change. He has submitted a full written statement accepting responsibility. He is removed from active duty pending retraining and review by flight operations. Michael folded his hands on the table. What about the earlier complaints? The head of customer relations shifted in her chair. They were handled locally. Michael's eyes lifted. That was not an answer. She swallowed. They were minimized locally. There it was. The truth had finally walked into the room without makeup. Michael leaned back. Outside the glass wall, employees moved through the corridor with coffee cups and laptops. The company looked normal from a distance. That was what troubled him most. Harm often lived inside normal things. A form closed too quickly, a complaint coded too softly, a supervisor protecting a familiar employee, a passenger told to calm down so the schedule could survive. Michael thought of his mother in row 28, hands folded, back straight, phone face down on her lap. He heard her voice. "Make sure the next woman does not need her son to be the CEO." He stood. Every chair seemed to stiffen with him. "Here is what we are going to do," he said, not because the public might find out, not because lawyers are watching, because this company lost sight of the simplest rule in service. He looked around the room, people first. No one interrupted. Michael continued. "Claire Whitman is terminated for cause. Her file will reflect falsification of records, discriminatory treatment, and violation of passenger dignity standards." The General Counsel began to speak. "Michael, the phrase discriminatory treatment may increase exposure." Michael looked at her. "Then we will be exposed to the truth." She closed her mouth. He turned back to the room. "Captain Mercer remains employed only if he completes remedial command training, bias intervention training, and supervised return to duty. His failure was not technical. It was judgment. We will treat it that way." Ethan nodded. Michael moved to the next point. "Every unresolved or minimized complaint from the past 5 years will be reopened for pattern review. Not just first class, every cabin, every station, every crew base. The room shifted. That was not a memo. That was an earthquake. The chief financial officer looked up. That will be expensive. Michael's voice was cold. So was our silence. No one challenged him after that. 3 months later, Crestline Airways launched a new company-wide program called the Dignity Standard. It was not a poster in a break room. It was not a video employees clicked through while eating lunch. It was training with names, records, scenarios, and consequences. Gate agents had to practice what to do when a passenger was questioned unfairly. Flight attendants had to learn the difference between safety authority and personal bias. Captains had to complete case-based reviews on command responsibility. Managers had to reopen complaints that once would have been buried under words like misunderstanding or miscommunication. And at the start of every session, there was one sentence on the screen. A passenger does not have to prove they belong before being treated with dignity. The first time Monica Reed stood in front of a training room, her hands shook. She wore her uniform, same wings, same Navy jacket, but she was not the same woman who had stood frozen in the galley that morning. 20 new hires sat before her, young faces, nervous faces. People eager to do well, still innocent enough to believe bad moments announced themselves clearly. Monica knew better. She looked at them and took a breath. "My name is Monica Reed," she said, "and I failed a passenger before I helped her." No one moved. She told the story plainly. No drama. No self-protection. She told him about Seat 3A, about the skip service, about the repeated boarding pass checks, about the way her stomach knew something was wrong before her voice did. Then she paused. "The hardest part to admit is this," she said. "I was not confused. I was afraid." A young trainee in the front row lowered her pen. Monica looked at her. "Fear is real in this job. You worry about supervisors, schedules, reports, being called difficult. But fear cannot be the person in charge of your character." Her voice steadied. "When you see a passenger being treated like they do not belong, do not wait to find out who their son is. Do not wait to learn they are important. They were important before you knew their name." In the back of the room, Evelyn Brooks sat quietly beside Michael. She had not planned to attend. Michael had asked once. She had said no. Then Monica had written her a letter, not polished, not corporate, just honest. So Evelyn came. She listened. She watched Monica turn shame into service. At the end, Monica looked toward her. "Mrs. Brooks taught me something that day," she said. "She said somebody always pays for our silence. I want every person in this room to remember that before you choose comfort over courage." The room stayed silent. Then Evelyn stood, slowly. Every trainee turned. She walked to the front with the same careful steps she had taken down that airplane aisle. Her gold airplane pin shone on her collar. She did not take the microphone. She did not need it. "I was a teacher for 42 years, she said. "So I will say this like a teacher. You will make mistakes. Some will come from ignorance, some from fear, some from pride. But when you are responsible for people, you do not get to hide behind not knowing forever." The trainees listened like the room had narrowed to her voice. Evelyn continued. "Respect is not premium service. It is not a perk. It is not something saved for passengers in expensive seats. Respect is the floor. It is where decent treatment begins." Michael watched from the back, his eyes shining. Evelyn looked across the room. "And when you see someone being made small, do not ask first whether helping them will cost you. Ask what it will cost them if you do not." No one wrote for a moment. They just sat with it. 6 months after that morning in Atlanta, Crestline flight attendants began reporting more issues, not fewer. At first, some executives panicked. Then Ethan Parker said what everyone needed to hear. The problems were already there. Now people trust us enough to name them. That became another kind of progress. Not clean, not easy, real. Captain Mercer completed his retraining. His first day back, he briefed his crew before boarding and said, "If any passenger concerns identity, appearance, race, disability, language, age, or class, we slow down. We verify. We listen. We do not let speed make our decisions for us." He meant it. Richard Palmer sent a letter to Evelyn once. She read it at her kitchen table, beside a bowl of soup Michael had brought over because he still worried too much. Richard wrote that he had spoken up at a country club when another member mocked a black couple waiting for valet service. He wrote that his voice had shaken. He wrote that he had thought of her words, "Spend your influence differently." Evelyn folded the letter and placed it in the drawer with his first apology. She did not call him. She simply hoped the lesson kept working. 1 year later, Evelyn boarded another Crestline flight. This time, no one knew she was coming. Michael had not warned the crew. She would not have allowed it anyway. She wore the navy dress again, the gold airplane pin, the same repaired leather purse. At the aircraft door, a young flight attendant looked at her boarding pass and smiled. "Good morning, Mrs. Brooks. C3A is right this way. May I help with your bag?" Evelyn studied her face. No suspicion, no hesitation, just kindness. "No, thank you, baby," Evelyn said. "I can manage." As she walked down the aisle, Monica Reed watched from the galley. She was training that flight. She saw the young attendant greet Evelyn with warmth. She saw Evelyn sit down with dignity untouched. She saw a small piece of the world behave the way it always should have. Monica exhaled, not relief, gratitude. Evelyn opened her book. Outside, sunlight moved across the wing. For a moment, she touched the gold pin and thought of Samuel. The boy he believed in had changed an airline, but the lesson had come from her, from a woman others had mistaken for powerless because they never understood the kind of strength that sits quietly until truth requires it to stand. Some stories do not end when the wrong person gets fired. They end when the next person is treated better. They end when silence loses one more hiding place. They end when dignity becomes standard, not surprise. If this story reminded you that respect should never depend on wealth, status, race, or appearance, like this video so more people can hear it. Subscribe for more stories about courage, justice, and human dignity. And in the comments, write these 3 words: never stay silent.